we accumulate those causes, so that's why it's ripening the results within us. So in order to get rid of this suffering, just wish to free from suffering alone, it's not going to purify our suffering, it's not going to remove our suffering, but it's good. Just having the wish to free from suffering is also very good. But just only wishes, it's not going to remove our sufferings. So what we need is actually we have to understanding the causes of sufferings, and then we need to deal with these causes. So what are the causes of sufferings? Mainly the causes of suffering is the mental afflictions we have, and because of mental afflictions, we accumulate contamination. So the contaminated karma, contaminated karma and the mental afflictions are the causes of sufferings. So if you have a wishes to free from suffering, then we have to first purify those causes we have. So without remove those causes, how much we try, our suffering will never ever end it. It's always we experience, always it comes again and again. As long as causes are there, of course the result will comes. So that's why the second noble truth is the truth of origin of suffering. So the first truth of suffering, which we have to understand, we have to identify the suffering as a suffering. Maybe sometimes we think, oh, why we have too much talking about the suffering? Because the purpose of our life is to achieve the ultimate peace and happiness, and to overcome sufferings. So that's our main purpose. So in order to overcome suffering, first we have to understand suffering as a suffering. Without knowing the suffering, how can we change those suffering? How can we purify that suffering? That's why the first noble truth we discuss about the truth of suffering, which main our purpose is to identify, to recognize suffering as a suffering. And among the many different levels of sufferings we have, but among those suffering, but one important suffering which what you call important suffering we have to know is the pervasive suffering or suffering of conditioning. So the pervasive suffering or the suffering of conditioning is quite hard to understand as a sufferings. So that's why the last, the talk we had the focus of the suffering of changing and pervasive suffering. The suffering of suffering is not that much difficult. Even animal can understand that. But the suffering of changing and the pervasive suffering are the part of suffering as a suffering. So we understand from deep of our heart, all of them are the part of suffering. Then when we deal with the suffering, we can be able to deal with much deeper way. Otherwise, there's just only, gross level of suffering. Only we understanding that, then to deal with this kind of suffering, we don't need to engage with the Dharma. So all this, the deeper the level of the suffering we're experiencing, when we really understand that, then when you through our mind, you feel like really wish to get rid of them, wish to free from them, you feel disgust to those suffering you're experiencing, then when you really feel wish to free, because if you don't have wish to free from these suffering, like a suffering of suffering, it's, everybody can, feel that, but the suffering of changing and the pervasive suffering or the suffering of conditioning, so these are the suffering. First, we should understand as a suffering. Then second, when you understanding these are the part of suffering, that can help us to generate the desire from deep of our heart, wish to free from them, wish to get rid of them, wish to stay away from them, wish to purify them. So when you have that wishes, from deep of your heart, then we will, in order to get rid of these things, then what are the causes of suffering? So that's why the second noble truth comes. The causes of suffering I mentioned earlier, the karma, the negative karma, and the mental obscurations, which mainly afflictive obscuration, and they do have cognitive obscuration and afflictive obscuration both, are the causes of suffering, but mainly when we talk about the renunciation practice, we mainly focus on afflictive obscuration. It's called mental affliction or diluted emotion. So specifically, we focus among the two different obscurations we have, but mainly here the afflictive obscuration. So the negative emotion or the afflictive emotions, we have the mainly anger, attachments, greedies, jealousy, arrogance, and egos, and so forth. Among these mental afflictions, one of the important, the fundamental, the causes of all these mental afflictions is the mind of ego grasping or the mind of self grasping, where they grasp self who exists independently, inherently, without labels or imputed by names and thoughts, who exists by its own. So that kind of mind we call the mind of the ego grasping or mind of self grasping, which is the fundamental causes of all the mental affliction. So because of the mind of ego grasping, and the mind of ego grasping is just believe, just grasp, or just apprehend the self, the phenomena where we see these are just we grasp, these are exist independently, which means they exist by its own, something solid, absolute, who exists objectively without depending on others, who exists by its own. That kind of grasping, who grasp and it create all these kind of phenomena which we believe in. Based on mind of ego grasping, then it brings self-centered. So the mind of ego grasping creates self, means who exists independently. It's not cherishing self. This mind is just belief, just apprehending self means something solid, absolute, something there. I can, looks like it's sort of like a pointable or the findable self, something we can point it, something we can find it, something we can grasp it, something solid. That kind of, what do you call phenomena, they grasp. Then because of that, that's self-centered or selfish mind. So when the self make very solid, then there's another mind say, oh, we cherish that. Now we what do you call in order to take care of itself, then you negate it to the others to protect self. So it creates some sort of what you call the self-centered. The self-centered, the mind, it's based on the mind of ego grasping, but that mind is believing or grasping or apprehending self is much more important than all others. Self is important than all others. Self is important than others. So that's why in order to take care of the self, and they don't care about others, you can steal, you can abuse them, you can chop it, you can do anything as soon as, make self something benefit or something they're seeking. So that mind's called mind of self-centered. It's only thinking about the self. only thinking about me, just self. That's very narrow-minded, very small-minded. So that kind of mind is create the very narrow, the small, just only thinking about the self. Because of that self-centered, then out of self-centered, the things which makes you self-happy, you attach to those things. Or the things who create suffering to self, that's anger. So anger and attachment, how strong, how heavy, based on how strong selfish. So if you have a very strong self-centered or selfish mind, so any phenomenon, any object, when they makes you happy, you very strong attached to those objects. And any objects who hurts you or harms you or who makes you very uncomfortable, who creates you some kind of problems, you hate them, you're angry. So all these other negative emotions, the other people when they success, you're jealous. So when you got success, you arrogance, it creates your arrogance, egos. So all those negative emotions arising because of self-centered. Self-centered because of mind of ego grasping. The mind of the ego grasping is the fundamental causes. Out of that mind of ego grasping, self-centered or selfish mind, out of selfish mind, all other negative emotions today we have. And these are the poison. These are the poison the mind who destroy all the peace and happiness, who creates suffering not only toward oneself, it can affect your families, the society, the communities, and everywhere. This is the really sort of what you call the poison, the root, the poison root. It only brings the poison, only brings this suffering and negative things. So these negative emotions are the one of the main causes of the suffering today we are experiencing. Unfortunately, the human beings, we always think, oh, I suffer because of business, because of family, because of our boss, or because of this or that system. And, we try to point always out there. Of course, these are the conditions, but these are not the fundamental causes. The fundamental causes is within your mind stream, which call these negative emotions. So when the circumstances arises, then negative emotions arise. When those negative emotions arise within your mind stream, the first result is destroy a piece of your mind. So when anger arises, you have no longer peace. Your pleasure, your happiness, your joys, it's finished, it's gone, it's destroyed by 1 minute of anger. So just when your anger arises, the happiness within your mind, the peace in your mind is first completely gone, completely destroyed. And that anger belongs to you. This is your mind. It's not somebody's, others there. Then it's not only stays inside there. Then it's effect to your physical, your actions, everything turn into the violence. So that's why the first thing is those anger will destroy your peace of your mind. Second is its effect to your physical actions, your speech, everything. So like simply, when the anger arises, you can see that your face is completely turned into negative, violent, scary, or really wrathful face. So if they turn into this kind of wrathful face, it's to the individual, do he or she really wants to show those scary, wrathful face? Of course not. Buddhists believe human nature is very pure. Human nature is very, very innocent, very pure. It's not only belief, just for simple thing we can use. You can go to the philosophy point of view. It's a very complicated explanation, but the simple way to explanation is, if human nature is anger, if anger is human nature, then of course the first thing is when anger or hatred, when they arise within your mind stream, you have to be very comfortable. You have to be happy, very comfortable, comfort. But when this emotion arises, we are not comfortable. We are not happy. It really disturbs us. If this is our nature, why? Why we feel uncomfortable? Why this emotion can disturb us? So because of this is not our nature, so these are what you call the temporary. When they arises, it's very disturbs our mind stream. That's why it's not our nature. And also, these are just temporary because it comes and goes. If it's our nature, you have to stay always there. But anger and attachments or those negative emotions not there, remaining like 24 hours. It comes and goes and comes and goes like a sky. The nature of like sky is very pure and clean, and the clouds comes and it goes. When those thick clouds comes and they create all those thunderstorms and winds and all those things and destroy it, then when they goes, it's clean. So it comes and goes. But the nature of sky is not, it's like a pure, clean things. Similarly, nature of human mind is very pure. So those negative emotions are the temporary. But the point is, these emotions, when they arises, the first I mentioned earlier, it disturbs one's own mind. Then second, it affects our actions. So I mentioned earlier, when the emotion arises, our face, first simple thing is our faces turn into very scary, a wrathful face. So do human beings really want to show this wrathful face? If the human being really wants to show the wrathful face, then why? Why they spend so much money, so much time to try to make this beautiful? Put so many the colors and all these things we put it and we try to make beautiful. So the human nature wants to show beautiful, right? They wants to show beautiful. They wants to show respect. So this beautiful, expensive face, who will destroy this face? Not other people. It's one's own anger. At the 1 second of the anger when it arises, this beautiful, expensive face is turned into very scary, very wrathful face, completely destroyer, very expensive, spend so much time, finish. It's completely gone, the destroyer, by one's own anger. So simple, the logic. Do human being wants to show that? Not at all. Nobody wants to show this scary face. Everybody wants to show a beautiful face. But why there comes this negative emotion, the poison, this mental disease that create the problem. They destroy one's own face. So beautiful turn into very ugly, right? The ugly face, which means it makes scare to anybody. So when the people show you very wrathful face, everybody scared, don't want to see that. Everybody, live away from that, stay away from that. So that means it's scary, it's ugly. So that's ugly face turned by one's own anger. You can see this negative emotion, how much it's destroying one's own dignity, one's own peace, happiness, everything, joyfulness, destroyed by it. Then that negative emotion then affect the actions, like a speech. Your speech will turn into very violent, very bad speech, harsh word, lying, all this screaming to other people, complaining, criticizing them, accusing them, all those negative speech comes out from your mouth by those negative emotions, right? Then your actions become violent, negative. So because of you act those violent, negative action, what you got it? What is make it? Is the point is this violent action you acted result, it creates a problem. It creates suffering. The first result is everybody scared to you. So you, when the people screaming you, when the people saying very bad word, when the people doing some, hello. Yeah, my breakfast has come. So that's why the violent action, you don't want to see the others when they shout it to you, when they screaming you, when they do something bad to you. What you feel, you're scared. You don't want to stay with this guy. You want to stay away with that. So when you act this to the other people, you're doing same thing. It's create the other people scare, fear. So because of that, they stay away. So point is, where you act the violent, you give the message to the other people. You put the message, seed in their brain, saying, I am a danger people. I am a danger person. So stay away from me. So that kind of message. So because of you act violent, what is going? It's everybody's in their brain thinking, oh, this guy is quite scary. This is, a scary person. So it's makes distant. So that's why because of that, it's created, destroy your relationships, your friendships, and also if people will lose the trust, they lose their like what you call the feeling. Usually have like close feeling. Usually they have trust. They have some kind of frankly the feeling. All this feeling will destroy her by those bad actions. Because of even you acted, you think, oh, it's gone, finish. That doesn't mean that. You put so many bad seeds to those people in their mind stream. So that's why the deep of their heart, it stays distant. So always, oh, this is danger person. One time, two times, three times, then it's more. Eventually, it's explosion. So it's huge, big problems. So the problem we engage is because of human action, our bad action. So simple that families, they're fighting, they're screaming each other. They have so many family dramas going on within the family. The living with this kind of life is not really happy family, not really harmony, because there's so much problems going on because of the people behave, people actions. Then it goes to society, communities, and the big things, the nations, each others. So those violent action can create so much problem in this world by human action, the violent action. So those violent action, simply, in this world, it is saying there's more than 7 billion human beings living in this world. Of course, all of them have desire to live happy, peaceful, harmony. Nobody wants suffering. There's no caution, no doubt. But the majority, all the human beings experiencing suffering, they're all, what you call destroyer. They're all experiencing pains and suffering, physically, mentally, emotionally. Suffering doesn't matter rich or poor, educated or uneducated, or very powerful person, or superstar, or whoever. All of them have their own way of experiencing suffering. And all these sufferings we're experiencing, it's created by human being who lives in this world. It's not about come from some kind of different planet, or aliens or something. It's not from there. So we are the human beings creating those suffering. We are the human beings experiencing this suffering. We are the human beings don't want these sufferings. So why? Why we suffer? Because of our behavior. because of our action, the violent action. It's called the action, the karma. So the karma doesn't mean, the many people think karma means, oh, your past life you've done. Karma means action. So if you act bad, results bad. That's simple, right? So of course, as a Buddhist, we believe in also our past lives, the karma, lots of karma. Uh, these are uh, more difficult to understanding if speech we have to prove first our past life and all these things. But the simply first action, which means even in this life, when you act negative, the violent, you can see the results, the violent results, the sufferings. So karma means the action. So human bad actions, the contaminated action, we acted. Because of that, we suffer. So the simple thing is that we are the people who create those negative actions, you accumulate those negative karma, negative action. That's why we are the people, human beings, are experiencing all these sufferings. So we should really think, the suffering today we're experiencing, it's created by human beings. We create it. So how we create it? Because we acted very much, the negative, the contaminated action, the karma we accumulated. Why we accumulate those contaminated karma? Because we are still, the dominant by negative emotions. We are dominant by afflictive emotions, diluted emotions. So because of those negative emotions, create all those negative behavior. The human action, it comes from human mind, right? When your mind is something wrong, then our decisions, first we need to decide. Decisions come from mind. If your mind is mistake or wrong, our decisions comes wrong and mistake. So our plannings come mistake. That's why our actions come mistake. So when you act mistake, you ended up the mystic life, which is the suffering. So all those mistaken life we're experiencing because of our mistaken planning, decision, action. Those mistaken actions come from mistaken consciousness, the mistaken mind, which call negative emotion. So that's why the negative emotion, as long as if the person is under the influence of negative emotion, under the power of negative emotions, always remain suffering. So that's, it's not like, oh, I have headache, I lost my job. It's not only that kind of suffering I mentioned earlier, right? There are many different levels of suffering. But the point is, if the person living under the influence of mental afflictions, you are experiencing the suffering we call the conditioning suffering, the pervasive suffering. So the suffering of conditioning, suffering, the pervasive suffering. So we experience that. Then based on that and other suffering, suffering of changing, suffering of suffering, and all these other things. From the Buddhist point of view, born in the samsara, right? The samsara, the suffering of cycle existence. We're circling in these suffering realms because of our mind is still occupied by mental affliction. So the negative emotion who tied us, who hold us into samsara. So we circling in samsara by our negative emotions and contaminated karmas. So those karmas and the negative emotions are the fundamental causes. As long as if we are not free from them, then always circling in samsara. The simple thing is we have suffering of aging. It doesn't matter rich, poor, how a healthy person, all of us will going to experience suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, disease, right? All of us. Then finally, suffering of death. So born in human in this life, these the suffering, there's no way to free from these suffering. We have to experience. Why? Why we have to experience suffering of aging, suffering of disease, suffering of death and die? Because of the human beings, today we live with this contaminated body. It's called this meat body, the contaminated. Living with this body, this is the body is source of suffering. It's because of this body, we're going to be suffering of aging, suffering of death and dying, suffering of, sickness and disease. So we got disease, we're sick because of we having this contaminant. This is not pure body. This is the meat body. So why we have to live with this contaminated body? Why? Right? So that's why we're saying, because the body we have to live is because of our karma. So that kind of action, the karma, is a much deeper way of be talking about. Past life of the karma, the hoods. That's the karma we have to live. That the result of this karma, the contaminated karmas, the results always comes the contaminated result, because the causes are contaminated. The causes are contaminated. Of course, the results comes contaminated. The cause and effect, the relationship, the relationship between cause and effect is nature. It's nobody created. It's just nature. If causes is good, result is good. They are the what you call the same natures. The relationship they have is the same. If causes is bad, result is bad. Like for instance, that's their nature. So there's no what you call I don't know this. Who created or how it's no who created how. It's nature. If causes is bad, result is bad. For instance, if you plant the apple seeds, the results comes apple tree. It never ever goes into banana or orange or some other fruits. Doesn't matter how many prayers you can do, how important, like holy water, whatever you put it, it's the apple seed always give the apple trees, right? So because the cause and effect, the cause and effect, the relationship is nature. If causes is that, results come that. So why we need to live with this contaminated body? Because of the causes of this body is contaminated, which is contaminated karma, the actions. So those karma are contaminated because those karma is fundamental causes by negative emotions. The negative emotions are the negative, the contaminated. So because of this contaminated mind and negative emotion, out of that, whatever action you create through your body, speech, mind, all of those actions, the karmas, become contaminated. And you act, it's gone. You keep these seeds in our mind stream. So then, next, when you're connecting your mind, consciousness into different body always have to be contaminated, because this kind of body you got it comes from your karma. The karma is contaminated. So circling in samsara, it's by those mental affliction. So as long as if you're born in samsara, there are, of course, we will going to be experiencing this suffering, because our body itself, it's a meat body contaminated, so there's nothing to, avoid it. It's have to experience. The way, to free from suffering of illness, suffering of disease, suffering of aging, completely free from this suffering, we have to free from contaminated body. So in order to free from this contaminated, purify this contaminated body, what we need to do, we have to purify those contaminated karma, which is fundamental causes of this body. In order to free from those contaminated karma, we have to purify negative emotion, which is fundamental causes of those karma. So there's as long as if you are not free from those negative emotions, then we are circling in samsara and we are experiencing all these sufferings. So all this suffering we are experiencing today, it's created by our own negative karma and negative emotions. So these are the two which we call causes of suffering, the origin of suffering. So that this is the fundamental, so important we have to know, because of course all the human beings in this planet, everybody doing so many things, morning to till bedtime. We rush, we run up and down, we're moving so many things. It's the simple reason is to achieve happiness, to experiencing full of joy and happiness, and to overcome suffering. The simple, that's the purpose. The young age, we go to the schools. Most of the young age, we spend most of our time into school for educate. It's for what? So education dating, when you have good educate, you can got good job. Then what? If you have a good job, you have a good money. Then what? If you have money, then you think it's happiness. So everything is supposed to be for happiness, for peace and happiness. That's why every action, go to job, work, marry with somebody else, or having children, all this your decision, the life you choose, supposed to be for happiness. Nobody choose for suffering. Oh, I study because of suffering. I want to be suffered, that's why I'm studying. Nobody do that. So our genuine, the human mind, the desire, it's for happiness, seeking happiness. That's why we're doing all these things. But do we really achieve happiness? These 7 billion human beings working really hard, do they really achieve happiness? Of course not, right? We can see everybody have their own problem. Sometimes our suffering is going much bigger than when we are teenage, when we are young teenage times. When you become an adult, you can see more stress, more depressions, more fear, more worry, it's more unpleasure, more suffering, the pain than when you were young. So you study, you have freedom, you have independent more and more educate, more material, so you have more power, but you have more suffering. So you gain all this, you work very hard to achieve these things for happiness, but do you more happier than before? Not. There are a number of people, many people with more suffering than that. So we should learn the suffering, the happiness, is not only by materials. These are not just come from materials. It's so much important that within our mind stream, because when we talk about I'm suffering, I'm happiness, what's that really mean? Unfortunately, we grow up in this kind of society that, I don't know, the system today we have, the education systems today we have. In the majority in this world, the education system we have is all material. So we learn about those all materials, we grow up with them, and everything we're doing about the material. But unfortunately, the majority, they don't know about internal world, the consciousness, the mind. They're completely dark. They have no any knowledge about what is it, where it's come from, how to deal that. They have no information about that. They're very smart about material world, but the internal world, they're completely blank, nothing, the darkness. Because of that, your material life, successful, great, fancy, but the internal world, full of pain, full of rotten. So there are a number of people, the human beings, living that kind of life. Your material, everything's fancy, everything's going right, but the inner world, full of stress, full of depression, full of worry, full of pain. So internal world, full of rotten. And they're protecting everything's all right, everything's all right. But actually, you experience follow pain. Pain's internal. So because of not knowing that, and the system we have is, of course, it's about the material. We are smart in material. Because of living with that, point is the majority of the human being is still so much suffering, so much pain. So that's why it's because of lack of education about the mind. But the point is when we talk about I'm happy, I'm suffering, when we talk about it, what really we talk? Something which means external, something wrong, or where? Suffering and happiness, it's each individual's mental experience. As long as if your mind is experienced with full of stress, full of depressions, fear, the worries, and all those pain, then external life, even you wearing the very fancy clothes or dress or jewels and eating with very fancy foods and a luxury life like a physically doesn't matter as long as if your mind is experienced full of suffering, you are suffering. Even your physical life is very, very simple. Way of your dress, way of your foods, and way of your life is very simple. But your mind, if full of peace, full of joy, if you live like that, you are happy. You achieve your purpose. It's the happiness. So experience it. You achieve that. So happiness and suffering is not about those material surrounding you. It's absolute in one's own mental experience. What you experience, that's the you. That's your achievement. So those material today we have, it's supposed to be serve the human mind experiencing joy. That's the reason we keep those material. So the mind, to make mind happy, to experience joy, the mental joy, or the consciousness, to experiencing joy and pleasure. How many consciousness we have? In general, there are many, but mainly we call the six main mind or six main consciousness, which are the five physical sensory consciousness and the sixth mental consciousness. So five physical sensory consciousness, which are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body sense consciousness. Then mental consciousness. So to make happy, to experience joy means this six main mind experience joy and pleasure. So in order to make eye sense consciousness happiness, what we doing? So we make all those beautiful colors and design and shapes and all these things, right? So these are for eye sense consciousness. So the beautiful, like for instance, the flowers. People buy very expensive flowers and decorating that. For what? It's simply for make eye sense consciousness happy. Eye sense consciousness only perceive or cognize form, which are colors and shapes and like that. Eye sense consciousness can't perceive the taste, can't perceive the smell, right? It's not. Only they can able to perceive or cognize form, which are colors and shapes. So that's why the flowers and all those decorations we created is for eye sense consciousness. So I usually use that example. And sometimes when we go to the fancy, very fancy restaurant, and the first they brings a huge big plate, and the food inside the plate is just only small portion, just 1 teaspoon portions of foods. But there's so many things around there, not eatable there. It's all those decorations, put it there. And the food is just only one small portion, stats, and all this. So we're thinking, what is this? Coming here for eat, and the food is just only one small portion. All those decorations put around there is for what? It's simple for eye sense consciousness. So the eye sense consciousness only experience these colors and decoration, the shapes and all these things. Then for the no sense consciousness, smell. So they try to make a nice smell. Uh, People buying those very fancy perfumes, it's for smell. You can't see what is that. You can't taste it. It's for smell. So if your nose is something in a problem, if your nose sense consciousness is not working very well, its nose faculties is something going wrong, then whatever smells there, it's not going to, affect you. It's not going to work. It's just useless. But if you can't smell, then whatever perfume you use is just useless, right? So that's simple. It's for no sense consciousness to make happy. Then for the tongue sense consciousness, the taste. So the taste, we eat delicious for tongue sense consciousness. For ear sense consciousness, music, all those beautiful musics we're listening for ear. Then for the body sense consciousness, the tangibles, the people buy the clothes, the smooths and the lights and all these kind of things for body sense consciousness. So these are all those material we're using is or serve human consciousness to experiencing pleasure. Then mainly mental consciousness. Through that sensory consciousness, joy, they give message to the main mind. It's mental consciousness. When the mental consciousness full of joy, experience full of joy, then you achieve it. Where you spend money and something, you got it, the result, happiness. So all of these things simply for happiness one's own mind. But mental happiness is not only, experiencing by physical material. In order to experiencing pleasure, the joy, the mind itself has a huge, big role, important role. If this mind is not doing well, then external material, how much you created, it's not going to experience. So in order to experience full of joy, it's the mind itself, important role, very important. So that's why if your mind is full of ego, full of anger, then out of anger, out of ego, out of negative, you go to the restaurant, you're very sensitive, even the very fancy restaurant, you're sensitive into negative, you always look into negative sides, then or by accidentally, whatever reason, unintentionally, sometimes, the waiters, they fold the glasses here or there or something, then you feel angry or feel these are disrespect. I spent so much time. Just whatever you label and negative, then you're angry. When you're angry, what you see, your face first turn into, I mentioned earlier, very scary, violent face, right? Very scary, violent face, you show that. So because of this violent, scary face, you show it. Who will see that? Your family, your friend who surrounded you. This beautiful food in front of you on the plate, and just seeing there one scary face, this eye sense consciousness. So first when they see this scary, ugly face, what they got negative image. It makes scare, not pleasure. Because of that kind of negative information in your brain, even you look in this beautiful, the foods in your plate, you're not going to achieve, you're not going to experience that joy because the eye sense conscious already see this. So that the person who worked very hard to make all those beautiful decoration useless. It's for pleasure, you are not going to get that pleasure. It's because it is mistake by this gift. Not. It's the mistake, it's your mind. There's something wrong there. You're not going to achieve what they created. It's supposed to be joy, but you are not going to receive this joy because it's not only the material, the external, it's each individual. The mind is very important to keep. When the mind has become negative, you're nothing. Then instead of hearing this beautiful song, sometimes the live in a song or whatever, instead of hearing this beautiful song, the guy was shouting, screaming, saying very bad things. You hear that. Your families hear that. So all those music that people, you know, uh, created, useless. It's not going to work that. You don't get the pleasure. Finish. So these are the example. So to receive this pleasure and happiness, not 100% material, the Lord. Very important rule that each individual's the mind. If that mind is very positive, very virtuous, then you can receive full of joy. If this mind is negative, then it doesn't matter whatever you spend this money or time, not going to receive that. So that's why the mind itself, it's so important to keep that, a virtuous, positive. So who disturbs this? Who makes this dirty mind? So we can see, and the mind, sometimes we say, oh, it hurts me very bad, it's angry, it makes me suffering the other people and this or that. When you say it hurts me, it's suffering. I mentioned earlier, it's that each individual's the mental experience. So your mind, who can able to hurt, harm to your mind? The definition of consciousness, of course, there's today, in this general, there are many definitions. Some people believe the mind is part of brain or part of this or that. There are many things you can see. From the Buddhist philosophy point of view, the mind, the definition of mind is merely luminous and knowing or experience. That's the definition of mind. The entity of mind is luminous, which means formless, invisible. And what the mind functioning is function knowing, experiencing. So that's why it's called merely knowing and experience, or and luminous is definition of mind. So because of luminous, because of invisible, physical form, physical matter can't harm to this mind. How strong fire to use can't burn your mind. Mind can't burn by fire. Doesn't matter how strong fire, can't burn the mind, right? How sharp sword you have, you can't cut your mind. Because the mind is invisible, sort of energy, is luminous. So how can the other metal, other form can harm to your mind? Its mind itself is formless. Then mind can able to harm to your mind. So can other mind harm to my mind? When the person is angry, can they able to harm to my mind? It's also impossible. How? Because their mind or their consciousness is within their body. My mind or my consciousness always remain in my body. So how can their anger come into my body? It's impossible. They always stay with them. So how can they able to harm to my mind? It's impossible. So who can able to harm to your mind? Your own mind can harm. So which kind of mind can harm you and create a problem, suffering to you? Your negative emotion. That's why the mind who harms you, who destroy your peace and happiness, who creates all those pains and suffering, those mind, it's called negative emotion, mental obscuration, afflictive emotion. So that's called the negative. So these are the fundamental causes of suffering. It can harm to everything. It can destroy whole your peace and happiness. So those negative emotions are fundamental causes. So that's what the Buddha is talking about. We suffer, it's not somebody created or somebody. It's we suffering because of our action, our behavior, violent. Our action or behavior, the karma we say, it comes from one's own negative emotion. So, fundamental causes of all the suffering is negative emotion. That's why we engage to the Dharma. So, negative emotion, to clean that, to purify those negative emotions, who can able to do? Is somebody outside people can take out my negative emotion? It's impossible, right? Some other people, how can they take out my negative emotion? As a Buddhist and Buddha himself say, he can't take out our negative emotion by hand. He can't just put like some kind of water and clean our negative emotions. It's impossible. It's completely self-responsibility. Only you can able to fix your mind, nobody. But in order to fix your mind, in order to purify those negative emotions, of course, you need to study, you need to understand, you need somebody to help you. So that's why we're relying on Buddha or all these great masters, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and other great masters, to help us to purify. That doesn't mean they can fix it, everything. Finally, decision is self. Self have to do that. This is completely self-responsibility. So take full of self-responsibility, and in order to do that, I rely on somebody else to help me how to do that, inspire me, and all these other things, right? So when you fully understanding that, those negative emotions, the disadvantages of negative karma and negative emotion, have to meditate again and again to make sure from deep of your heart you really, really understand the disadvantages of your negative emotion. So when you really understand that, then therefore naturally you feel you want to free from them. As a practitioner, so important thing is you need to be really, really, do you really want to free from your negative emotion? Sometimes we know by praying, by not from heart. So that's why we have to meditate again the truth of suffering and truth of origin of suffering. Through that you feel from deep of your heart to feel disgust toward one's own negative emotions and your negative karma, contaminated karma. Through that from deep of your heart you just wish to free from them. So if you don't have that wishes, then all your practice, the Dharma practice you're doing, it's not become a really, really benefit. Not that much benefit to you. Not really going on deep there. Instead of that, sometimes unfortunately, people doing prayer for mundane things, to success business, to success blah, 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 all those mundane things. It's from the uh, 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 medium scope, right? We talk about the lambda point of view. These are all the suffering, part of suffering. Then you seeking that to achieve that. That means you still don't know, really understanding the suffering of changing. You still don't understand suffering of changing as a suffering. So because of misunderstanding, of not understanding very well about these things, even the Dharma practice you're doing, you're reciting the mantra, you pray, you meditate, all these things for what? Or to success my business, to having good boyfriend, to good girlfriend, or to having husband or wife, or good child, or my children need to be happy. All these mundane things, you're seeking for that achievement, then doing prayer, and actually it's really contradict. It's the reality of the Dharma, the Buddhist, way of Dharma. It's supposed to be these are all part of suffering. So as long as if you don't understand, even your practice can contaminate it. So when you're understanding real these suffering and causes of suffering comes from one's own negative emotion, every your focus, it's always even the recitation, the mantra, even the practice you're doing, you fully focus on your mind to get rid of those negative emotions. The prayer you're doing is the prayer you pray for remove one's own negative emotion. So always going more inside instead of those, samsara pleasures. So that's why there's the first two truths, it's so important to not only understand, but meditate and feel, from deep of your heart to general samsara, the suffering, specific the causes of suffering. So simple example used to be said to other people. The example is, do you really, really feel disgust to your negative emotion? Do you really understand how the negative emotions harms you? Not only in this life, even in next and next and next and next life, harms you, destroy you. All the pains and suffering you experience because of that. You suckle in samsara because of that. But do you really know about that? Majority still don't know. How we know that? How you know the majority don't know that? Because you should caution yourself, you should example, you should just experience yourself. When you go to the clinic, when the doctor diagnoses you have a life-threatening disease, that moment when you hear that, how much scare, how much fear you have. You're looking everywhere to find the doctor, to find the medicine, the clinic or the hospital, and fix that. You panic it. You're going everywhere to seeking that. That means deep of your heart, you have a wish to free from those diseases. You disgust with those. You have fear that. When you go to the temple or the monastery and everywhere, it's a spiritual place, and then you diagnose you have anger issues, and then your teachers say, oh, you have anger, you have a hatred, or when you read in the textbook and they say, oh, this is anger means this, you have, oh, I have anger. When you diagnose you have the anger or a selfish or negative emotions, that moment, do you feel that same thing? You feel panicked, you worry, you're scared, you're seeking here, there, how to stop? No. You say, oh, who cares that? It's anger? Doesn't matter. So we don't know even this emotion, how bad. We are so much worried about this physical disease, how much is destroyer, it can kill one life, this life. Negative emotion, the suffering, not only one life. It can create a problem next and next and next and next life, endless life. We're going to destroy us. Much, much, much worse than those physical life-threatening disease, but we still don't know that. That's why we have not fear. That's why we don't have that much wish to free from that. As long as if you don't have fear of having those negative emotions, that means you don't have wish, you don't wish from deep of your heart to free from those negative emotions. Because of not strong wishes to free from those negative emotions, your practice always not going to focus that much, not become a strong practice. So that's the way. First two truths, so important. Meditate and think and from deep of your heart, to feel, wish to free from, of course, the mundane, all the samsara, the suffering, specific wish to free from fundamental causes of those sufferings, which are ones of negative karma and mental obscuration. But till if you don't feel that, try to meditate again and again and again. When you really feel from deep of your heart, then how should we stop this? If these negative emotions are impossible to stop, then of course we don't need to think about that. We don't need to meditate about. Rather, we should think about good things. Oh, it's no problem every time, other things. But these negative emotions are curable, changeable. So, of course, we have to prove that. It doesn't mean, oh, Buddha says this is curable. We have to use the logic, the reason, the example, and so forth. And through that, if you see this is curable, then freedom of negative emotion, which is called cessation of suffering, the third noble truth. Then you understand. Then third noble truth, how should we reach? Through the path, four noble truth paths. So the paths is the practice. can help to lead us achieve that truth of cessation. So third and fourth truths, it's important. Without knowing first two truths, then these two are not that much. So that's why today we talk about truth of origin of suffering. So now, those few weeks, meditate and really, do you really feel from deep of your heart, to wish to free from those general suffering, specific one's own anger, one's own selfish, one's own, self-grasping. That's the main enemy. This is the mind who's disturbing us, who creates suffering, not only out of pointing here, there, here, there. So that's why I do this thing, and the next class we were going to furthermore talk about these things and other two truths. So today we're going to live here. So since you don't have any questions, now we're going to do dedication prayer here. Dākli jīni sāpi jiwa de tendān tuwa kuna kāmpi tān jebara chū sāng chāpa tenpe nyingbo rindu sēji chū kānri ravi kōrvi shīngkām sū pendān tewa mā lū chū jere sāngwān tīn cīn chāt. Tāpe sīti pātū tēnchū chū simchō rinpo mā jī pānam kī chū chī jeba nyambā mē pā kōne kōngdō pē wā. Thank you.